They built me to end things quietly. That was the whole of my purpose. Not war, not glory. Just the clean correction of a problem too contained to justify the cost of more honest weapons. I was Warden 9, grown in a vat on Anchor Point Station, and trained on nothing but obedience and silence. And on the night the order came down, I understood it the way I understood everything, as a task with an endpoint. Anchor Point had been a relay post before the drift fever, a way station for freighters passing the rim. I had spent my whole short life in the containment wing, in a kennel bay built for things shaped like me, low ceilings, reinforced floor plating, a smell of disinfectant that never quite covered the older smell underneath it. My handlers fed me on schedule, and spoke to me only in command cant. I had no reason to believe any other kind of life existed for a thing built the way I was built. Armor-hided, four-legged when I chose to be, taller than a grown man when trained to stand for inspection. Ward 9 had gone quiet 11 days into the outbreak. The drift fever moved through bodies that way, burning hot, turning some of the infected into something that ran on hunger alone, and leaving others simply sick, simply waiting, simply human. Containment didn't sort the two. Containment counted the ward as a single risk and signed the order to close it. I went in through the service hatch at the hour the corridor lights dim for cycle rest, when fewer eyes would be on the feed. My handlers liked it that way. Clean numbers. No witnesses to argue with the report afterward. The ward was dark except for one light, low and amber, over a woman kneeling on the floor beside a man too sick to lift his own head. She had a cloth in one hand and a canteen in the other, and she did not look up at the door grinding open, because she had heard that door grind open 11 times that week, and nothing had ever come through it that mattered more than the man dying in front of her. I am built to read fear. It is the easiest thing in a body to read, the smell of it, the stillness or the scramble, the pulse climbing in the throat. She had none of it. She finished what she was doing, set the cloth down, and only then turned her head toward me, the way you'd turn toward someone who'd walked into the wrong room. "You're early," she said. Not to me, exactly, but to the hour, or to whoever she'd assumed would come eventually with worse news than a beast. I had ended 11 assets in training drift simulations, without once breaking stride. I did not know what to do with a woman who looked at 1,200 pounds of armor-plated culling stock and saw, apparently, an inconvenience in her schedule. She told me later, much later, after she'd given me a name simple enough to fit in a human mouth, that she'd already decided she wasn't leaving the ward whether or not it killed her, and that a decision like that tends to flatten a person's fear into something close to peace. I didn't understand peace yet. I understood only that she rose to her feet between me and the man on the floor, slow and unhurried, the way you'd stand to greet a guest rather than meet a verdict, and said the thing that cracked whatever clean line my training had drawn. "Easy," she said. "You don't have to kill us." It wasn't a command. It might not even have been meant for me. Humans speak that way to dogs sometimes, to calm themselves as much as the animal. But something in my directive split along that sentence like a hull along an old weld. I had been built to end a contained problem. She had just told me, plainly, that I didn't have to. Nobody had ever told me that before. Nobody had ever needed to. I sat down, not from training, from something with no name yet, a weight settling somewhere under the plating, where my handlers had never once bothered to look. The drift fevered came through the breach 2 hours later, the true sick ones, hunger-blind and fast. I met them at the door instead of her. That was the only part of the assignment I kept, the ending of things. Except now, I had chosen which things, and the choosing was the whole difference between a weapon and whatever I was becoming. She didn't watch any of it. She kept working on the man on the floor, trusting, on no evidence beyond a held breath and a held door, that I'd still be standing on the other side of it when she looked up again. One of them got a claw past my plating, low along the shoulder where the joint flexes. I made no sound about it. Sound wasn't useful, and I had no training in making it for any reason but threat. She found the wound anyway, hours later, in the gray hour before the cycle lights came back up, when she finally stopped to eat standing at the breach with me. She didn't ask permission. She knelt, cleaned it the same unhurried way she'd cleaned the dying man's fever sweat, and talked the whole time in a low, even voice about nothing in particular, the way you'd talk to settle a creature that had never once been spoken to without a command attached. I had no directive that covered being tended to, I held still and let her do it. And something in me that had only ever been wiring before that hour became, very quietly, something closer to a heart. She called me Bram by the third night, for no reason she ever fully explained, beyond saying it suited me better than a number. I didn't ask what it meant. I only noticed that when she said it, my whole bearing seemed to settle, the way a key settles into a lock built exactly for it. Director Cricks came on the fourth morning with 3 handlers and a written correction order. Because Ward 9 was still drawing breath, the station's books had filed as lost, and a non-compliant asset was a line item nobody above him wanted to explain. I'd learned by then to read the corridor feed they didn't know I could reach, and I watched him rehearse his face on the walk down, the kind of face built for reports and cameras, certain of its authority before it had even met the thing it meant to correct. He found Cade standing in the open hatch with 17 survivors behind her, the worst of the fever already breaking in most of them, and he found me at her shoulder, not crouched, not snarling, just present, the way a locked door is present. "Step aside, Doctor," he said. "The asset is being reassigned." "He already reassigned himself," she said, 3 nights ago. Cricks laughed, the way men laugh when they expect a room to laugh with them. None of his handlers did. They were watching me, doing the math handlers do. Distance, reach, how very still I had gone, and how little that stillness had to do with obedience anymore. "Stand down," he told me, in the command cant burned into my hearing before I'd ever had a name. It was the first order I'd received since the night I sat down on Cade's floor. I felt it land in the old wiring and find nothing left to grip. I didn't move. I didn't need to do anything else. The silence did the rest of the work, the silence, and the 3 handlers behind him slowly, carefully lowering their own weapons, because they'd read the same math I had, and none of them wanted to be the proof of it. Cricks's face did the thing faces do when authority meets a door it cannot open with volume. He looked at his own people for backing, and found none. One of the 3 handlers, the youngest, the kind who still flinched at his director's tone, took a slow step backward, weapon lowering the rest of the way, and that small motion seemed to cost Cricks more than anything I'd done. He looked, last, at Cade, who hadn't raised her voice once through any of it, and who only said, as quietly as she'd said it to me on the first night, "Write it up however you need to. He's not coming back to the program." Cricks didn't answer that. There wasn't an answer in his cant for a director outranked by his own subordinate's silence. He straightened his coat the way men do when they want a room to believe nothing has happened, told his handlers they were behind schedule, and walked back up the corridor at a pace just slightly too fast to be called unhurried. None of them looked at him on the way out. They looked at me, and at Cade, and at the 17 people standing behind her who, 11 days earlier, had been a number on a closure order. The official log called it an unauthorized defection event, a phrase that let everyone above Cricks sign off without asking the harder question underneath it. I've read it since. It is, as far as these things go, almost funny. What I remember instead is simpler. 17 survivors walked out of Ward 9 on their own legs, into a station that had already written them off. A director who'd come to correct a malfunction left the corridor without a single handler at his back, and never came down to that wing again, not that day, not in all the cycles after. And a woman who never once raised her voice taught a culling-beast what its own name could mean, just by being the first person calm enough to use it. I still answer to Bram. I have never once missed being Warden 9.